Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about the Action Army AAP-01. This video is going to be an instructional how-to guide of how to completely strip this thing apart and put it back together, and we're just going to get straight into it. No fancy music or anything like that. This is obviously a bog standard AAP-01 from Action Army. It's a under one dual model which has the semi and full auto selector. As some of them don't, they only have the semi-auto function. Let's get the box out of here. So first we're just going to check the gun is obviously clear, which it is, and no BBs in the barrel, not that we're going to be firing it anyway. We're going to push the button at the back here, and we're going to split the upper and the lower receiver. Just a little bit of wiggle side to side, and you'll be able to part them completely apart. First we're going to be having a look at the upper, or the slide section of the pistol. Now the thread protector here is just a counterclockwise thread. That will just slide straight off. And then to split these two halves, all we need is a 2mm Allen driver, Allen key, whatever you're going to use. Just has to be 2mm in size. They are metric screws. And we're just going to pull both these screws out here. Sometimes they'll want to stay in like this, and you just pull them out. They're both the same length. Once you've done that, you can pull the barrel assembly forward, and you'll notice sometimes that they get stuck on the upper receiver there. All you want to do is just turn it to the side and the thing will pop straight out. I've seen people putting them back together and they're ramming this thing in like that. Literally just turn it 90 degrees and it will fit past that section of the upper nice and easy. Once we've got the barrel section out, we're going to have a look at the hop unit first. And the inner barrel, we're going to go down to a 1.5mm Allen key, and we've got a screw on each side. It's made a little bit easier with this kinetic driver, which means I can spin it really fast and let the screws pull out. Once that's off, obviously we have the outer barrel off. If you are changing this outer barrel part, just a 1.5mm Allen driver again. You've got one central screw, and you can pull the iron sight off the front if you're going to fit it onto a new outer barrel, and that is completely disassembled. The hop unit, we're actually going to switch to a positive driver, Phillips driver. A lot of places call these different things. It's just a 4-flute driver. And we've got 4 screws, so we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, and this one actually gets blocked by the hot wheel, so if we turn the hot wheel, as in applying pressure, there's a little gap in the wheel there which allows us to access the screw. So you don't need to put your screwdriver at a funny angle. Just turn the hot wheel a little bit, and all these screws are the same length, so they can be pushed to one side. And then of course, what we're going to do, we're just going to turn the hop back off, just so there's no unwanted pressure there, and we can split the two halves. Once you pull this off, you'll have your hop arm, which applies pressure to the hot rubber. We'll have the inner barrel, the hot rubber, the two sections of the hop shell itself, which do have these captivating nuts in there, which is good really, because if you're switching your outer barrel on and off quite a lot, those are just a replaceable part. You're not going to damage the threads in the casing itself. That's off. You can also pull the hot wheels off just by loosening that screw. One wheel and the two wheels come off. And if you wanted to swap your inner barrel and hot rubber for something that's aftermarket, you can do this at the moment. Okay, to reassemble all this stuff, there's just a few things we need to get right. You've got your hop arm, which just slides into this little cavity on the back here. That slides in and then rocks into place like so. So the little arm sticks on the outside. Then what we're going to do, going to get the hot rubber, going to place that back on. I'm going to take the two nuts and just pop them into the little recesses below. Going to slide the barrel and hop rubber in here, just making sure that hop arm's all the way off. And we're going to flip this round, pop it on there. Sometimes things can fall out of place, just make sure everything's nicely seated. The hop arm, make sure that moves. If it doesn't, it's probably getting in the way of the hot rubber. As you'll see, we haven't screwed it up yet, but the little spline on the hot rubber is just kicking this out. We could just pop that back into place like so. And once we're comfortable everything's seated properly, we're just going to put these little Phillips countersunk screws into the little mounting holes there, like so. Just screw those down. Nice and snug. No need to over tighten these. And then if you've assembled this hop unit and the left hand side of the hot rubber is sticking out quite a lot, what you'll find is that hop arm hasn't sat in this recess and it's on the inside. So just take it apart and reassemble. As we put this hot wheel on, we've got the little piece of metal here that sticks out from the hop unit. We're going to apply that back in just so it sits in the little recess on the hot wheel. We're going to line the two arrows up on the hot wheel like so. Very simple indeed. Pop that Phillips screw back on the second wheel. Snug that down, and that is your hop completely reassembled. If you've put a nice hot rubber and barrel in there, just going to turn this all the way on. Make sure it's working. It's not, it's just kinked up there, so we need to turn that back off. And we just need to make sure that that's sat in on the hot wheel. Just try it again. We'll apply pressure. Now the hot wheel's moving, and we'll see we've got a hop there. So if I turn that off, all the way off here, we have now got no hop applied. With the AAP-01 series, you do have to apply some hop to stop the BBs rolling out the barrel. It's a very common issue that people don't look up on Google and such. They'll just go, oh, my BBs are falling out the barrel. Just put a little bit of hop on and it solves that. It does reference it in the manual. So we've got the upper receiver here. And what we're going to do, we're going to switch back to a 2mm Allen key or Allen driver. I'm going to remove two countersunk screws on the rear iron sight here, both the same length. Once those are removed, we can pull the rear iron sight out, and that will enable us to pull the complete bolt assembly out the rear of the receiver here. Now you'll notice these two steel captivating nuts that sit here. You have to be very careful when putting them back together that these don't pop out, because they will jam up the slide. The bolt assembly is very easy to come apart as well. You pop the little recoil spring guide here up slightly and you can pull that out and separate it from the spring. The assembly here, you've got two Phillips screws just in the end here, so we're going to switch back to a Phillips, and the Phillips that I've been using is a PH1, just a small style screwdriver in this fancy doodad I've got here. I'm going to release those two screws, and that will enable us to pull everything out the front here. Just give it a wiggle, the two screws and the mounting plate which holds the nozzle spring will come out like so. They're both the same length. You've got your nozzle spring there, so if you wanted to swap that out you can do, and then that's just the mounting plate that sits in the front. After that we can pull the nozzle out. Very quick and easy to do. We've got the cup, the piston cup on the end here. So if you're switching to like a new style lightweight bolt or something like that, you'll have to remove that piston cup. They usually don't come with one. So you can just put something underneath and pop that off there. The selector assembly just moves this metal piece left to right like a Glock 18. Going to take the same screwdriver, release that screw on the back there. That will then allow us to pull the selector off, and then we've got the other part of the selector there as well. That is the bolt completely disassembled. If you're assembling this thing, what we want to do is we want to pop the first part of the selector in there first. On the underside of the selector, you'll have this little ball detent and spring, which enables it to lock into place. We're going to pop that back on there like so. I'm going to pop the screw secure that in place, make sure it works, which it does. I'm going to take the piston cup, it only goes on one way, flat side at the top like a Glock 18. I'm going to take the nozzle here, I'm going to pop that back into place like so. It should go in nice and easy. We're going to take the bracket here, we're going to pop the nozzle spring on. Going to slide that down that little opening there, and that will go into place. It sits nice and flush with all the sides around it. We're going to take the two screws, going to pop those in the two side holes, not the center one. Tighten those up, make sure the nozzle moves freely, which it does. We can pop the spring back on the guide rod. And what I like to do is basically compress the spring like so. Gives the guide rod a little bit more room to get in there. And there we are, it's back into place. And this is where the iron sight sits and holds the blowback spring. Let's put this back into place. We're going to pop the assembly there. Going to load the rear sight like so, very easy. And this is where we want to be a little bit careful, because we don't want to push those captivating nuts out of the upper mold in there. So we're just going to slowly turn them as they go in. That'll grip it nice and tight. Quite a common issue is people not getting this bit right, and it blocks up their bolt assembly. Put the rear one in there, goes in nice and easy. Nip those two sections up, and you have your complete upper receiver assembly there. What we're going to do, you're going to take your hop and your barrel. You're going to line the two holes which are at the bottom. So if the barrel's pointing left, obviously the bit with the cutout section is the bottom. And we want to place it in like so to line those holes up. The hole at the bottom there lines up with the hole in the hop unit. We're going to take the two little screws. I'm going to go to a 1.5mm Allen key. Snug those down, don't over tighten them. We're going to turn the hop unit so it goes in like so, but we're going to turn it to the side, push it in, rotate it back, locks into place. Pop those two countersunk screws in there. We want a 2mm Allen key for this one. Snug those down, don't over tighten them. We're going to go back to a 1.5 because that's what we need to reattach the front sight to the barrel. Like so. Again, don't over tighten, you're screwing into plastic here. Just keep going until it starts to feel resistance and then stop. It's nice and tight. Put the barrel protector on there, and that is how to completely strip down and reassemble your upper receiver, barrel assembly hop unit, everything there. Apply lubricant where you need to if you're doing some maintenance or you're fitting upgrade parts. The upper is complete. Now we're going to move on to the lower assembly. So why would you be taking the lower assembly apart? Well, perhaps you're fitting the Ruger style lower. Perhaps you're doing the hammer replacement, because they do a steel hammer for these. The hammers do break quite a lot in these guns. But I'm going to run you through how to completely strip this thing apart. First, I'm going to push the safety out. So what I'm going to do, mine is set up so the red is on the left side. I'm going to push it over. As I push it over, I'm going to push this little bar up on the bottom, and it will pop out like so. And then I can pull the safety through. Next, I'm going to want to punch. There's a few pins to punch out, and there's also some screws to remove. So first of all, we're going to punch the pins out. So we're going to quickly tap these. One on the grip lower, one on the grip higher, and one where the trigger is. You can then push those out. Now there are some differences in these pins. The biggest, thickest pin goes where the trigger is, of course. We've got a chamfered pin, which is thinner in the middle, which goes at the top of the grip. And then we've got the middle-sized pin, which is a little bit shorter, which goes in just behind where the mag release is. Once we've done that, we're going to get a 2mm Allen key or Allen driver. There's 2 screws on the sides, so there's one there, and there's one on the opposite side, like so, both the same length. We've got one in the center here, which is a little bit longer. So that's one side, which is just located in front of the trigger section there. And then we can start to push this thing out. But as we push it, we want to make sure this doesn't spring out and shoot off. So what we're going to do, we're just going to put something behind that, like a finger or anything else. I'm slowly going to move up the hammer assembly like so, just a little bit. Once it's moved up a little bit, I can pull this button off here, and I can remove the spring. Do it very carefully because these can bend. Push the spring off the little mounting section in the back there. Once that's happened, we can push the whole assembly up, and you can push it from the front and the back. You will have to do both. So I'm just pulling up the hammer section there, and then pushing up from the trigger, and that pops everything out like that. It is 2 separate pieces mainly, and then you can pull it even further apart from slide release, trigger bar, trigger spring, front assembly, and your complete trigger pack there. The last thing which people do struggle with is the spring on the mag release. Now, the easiest way to do this, I want to make sure you can see, is we want to push it towards and forward, and you'll see it locks forward like that. Once that happens, you can press the mag release, it will fall out. This is if you're changing it round or anything like that. I'm just going to get some needle nose pliers and very gently pull this spring out here. These springs are more of a pain to get in than out. I'm just going to wiggle it from side to side as I pull, and that pulls out your mag release spring. You've got various components here, like you've got the safety section here. I'm not going to pull that out, but you literally just pull it and push down and that thing will pop out there. Trigger, a bar, you take a little spring off. If you're changing your trigger, you literally just punch out the top pin there on the trigger, and we can switch that out. We'll do that in a later video. And we have the ambi slide release there, and then we have the hammer assembly. Again, we'll go into more detail with this in a later video, because we're going to show you how to swap that hammer out there. So because we're going into detail with this, I'm going to save it for a different video. Putting it back together, you want to be careful that spring doesn't shoot off. We're going to have to be very careful. So you've got various different springs. You've got the spring for the slide release, which clips on the inside there like so, and it sits on the outside of this curve. And we can slide that over the trigger and we can kind of hold that all together in place. You will have a spring for your trigger bar. And whilst you hold all that together, you have to be very careful, like so. We can pop the spring on that little pin there on the front housing. And as we do that, we're just going to slide that assembly into the housing, and that will kind of contain everything as long as you don't let it fly off. All I'm going to do, see, it wants to shoot out like that. And this may take you a couple of times just to get right, it's not a problem at all. So if that happens, we just line the slide release, the bolt release up like that. We then slide that over the trigger and hold it. We then pop the spring on the front housing and slide the trigger assembly in like so. A bit of finger gymnastics there. We're going to slide that into place like that, and the trigger bar will stick up like that. This is the easiest way I found to put it together, because you don't want to be sort of having to focus on 20 different things at once. And what we can actually do here is we can take the trigger pin, we can push that through to hold that whole assembly in place, so that's not going to go anywhere. And if you pull the trigger much like a Glock, it will push this trigger bar up like so. And then you can take the hammer housing and we can line that trigger bar up with the hammer housing like that, which is far easier. And then we line that up with the body, goes into place like that. We pop the spring on the back of the housing there like that. We take the button, that goes in next. As we push the button in, we push the hammer assembly down, and that's all locked into place. We want to pop that pin in and that pin. Like so. Make sure the trigger pin's in as well. Just give a function check. Yep, everything works. The mag release, you can actually do this before or after. We want to get it, and we want to take this square section here and fit it into that section down there. So as you push it in, you push it in like so, and it will want to jump out at you because it doesn't want to sit square. But when you've done it correctly, it will sit in place. We just push that spring forward, we take the mag release, push that into position, and while you're doing this, you might just have to push the spring out of the way, like so. It might be very hard to tell on camera. And then we take the spring and we just seat it back onto the mag release like so. Just get a bit of light here for you so you can see. So you can see it just clips on there like so. Once that's clipped in, works nicely. We can try it. Works absolutely superbly. Take the side screws, pop them into the housing. 1 and 2. And there's no right or wrong order to do this in, as long as certain things get in place before others. I'm sure there's many different variations of ways to do this, but this is the easiest I've found. Those 3 screws back in. We take the safety and we push that in like so. And you'll hear it pop in when it does. Like that. Safety's on, safety's off. And we can pop the upper receiver on here. Final function check. We are empty. We've got a little bit of gas in the magazine. We're going to function check it, make sure everything works. Semi-auto. Flip the selector. And we are back in business. And that is how easy it is to fully disassemble and reassemble the Action Army AAP-01. The C model will be very much the same. There might be a little bit of difference with the selector and the front barrel system there, but mostly everything else is very similar. Thank you very much for tuning this video. I hope this has helped. Be sure to check out all the AAP-01 videos coming out on the channel very soon.